So I'd like to welcome to the channel tonight Charter, who's probably more commonly known in social media circles as Blue Collar Investments. Charter, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. So, Charter, I think the topic I want to start off with tonight. There's been a lot of news, recently about the Fed and are they done with doing interest rate hikes? Obviously we've seen a lot of interest rate hikes over the last year, and the whole reason for that is, as we all know, is because inflation, really picked up last year, and I
hmm
think we're just now getting to the point where it's almost back to normal, or not quite back to normal. I think one of the first questions I want to ask you, since you do deal with personal finances, how has the inflation over the last year affected people and their finances?
So, specifically to my area, what we're seeing is you've got a lot of people that were locked in on really good interest rates in 2020, 2021, and they're just sitting on their houses. So generally, where you have a lot of houses currently in the market, especially where I live currently, is the Huntsville, Alabama area. It's booming. Normally, you've got a lot of new builds and everything else, and so there's not many houses to choose from in these areas in some of the bigger cities. So what I'm actually seeing, and I'm personally guilty of it as well, as I'm seeing people move more and more rural. And so by moving further out in the country, you're able to get cheaper housing and everything else, but you're increasing your drive time. And like I said, I'm personally guilty of that. I currently drive 75 miles one way to work, which is why I'm sleeping in the tent right now. But it's you're seeing a big push for people going back to country living because that's what's affordable. So they're making a little bit, I know in my early 20s, the big thing was try to get in the city and never go back out in the country because I'm from a very rural area in Alabama, but now it seems like that's, flipped. Um, as far as the other stuff, unfortunately, I am seeing people reliant more on credit cards now. The Fed's released the recent, and I don't remember what it was, but the most recent amount for credit card debt with Americans is just staggering. You're seeing credit cards just go up every month, and people aren't paying those off every month like they should be.
Yeah. And do you think that's because other things are costing them more and they have less money to pay off their credit cards? Or what do you think is the big driver for that?
I think that is a large driver for it. I mean, groceries went up. I don't even know what it was. The last time I looked at it was like 12 to 15%. And I'm definitely seeing that. I've got a family of five. I've got three kids with my wife. And then the average car price right now, I think, is over $700 a month now. And I think the average used car price is approaching $600 a month. So
Wow.
you're seeing car payments that are just astronomical, and people just can't keep up.
Yeah. Wow. We should probably let our viewers know. You mentioned that you're sleeping in a tent right now. Maybe just to provide a little color, background on that. Can you
Okay,
explain what's going on?
so my 2 weeks out of the year, every year, my plant does what's called a shutdown or an outage, where I work currently at a steel mill. I'm currently at work right now, which is I'm not a biker. I don't wear this bandana for fun. So what happens is from Tuesday to like Sunday of last week, we didn't produce anything. We implemented three large pieces of machinery, but I live so far from work. I normally carpool with people, but normally I only work 8 to 10 hours. This whole outage, I've been working 12 to 16 hours every single day. So my
Wow.
wife and I decided that it was going to be better for me to stay closer, and I had a couple friends that I could have stayed with, but I really love camping. And so there is a website called Hip Camp, which is basically Airbnb for campsites. And I found a campsite that was about 10 miles from work. And so since
Oh.
Tuesday, I have been sleeping in a tent out in the middle of the woods in Mount Olive, Alabama.
Very nice. Well, and a much shorter commute, only being 10 miles
Much
away.
shorter. And, I've got three kids at home. So like, I'm going home to the tent site, cooking dinner. I don't have any kids screaming at me, wanting my attention. I mean, it's been kind of peaceful, but I do miss the family. I'm ready. I'm ready to go back home tomorrow.
Very nice. Well, and everybody should know too, right now it's November 21st, so temperatures are getting pretty low overnight at this point too, right?
Yeah, I got a really, really warm sleeping bag, so it hasn't been an issue.
Very nice. So, getting back to blue collar, can you tell us a little bit about what blue collar investments is about? What are you doing with your social media?
So there's been a very large shift in the blue collar industries. I would say in the past 10 years, where you are seeing guys in blue collar jobs making more money now than they have ever made before in their entire lives. And I'm seeing it now with my electricians all making well over six figures.
Wow.
And so what you're seeing is they're coming into an abundance of a wealth building opportunity, and they're just squandering it on ridiculous house payments. They're all buying brand new 2500, 3500 diesels, putting them on 37-inch tires, just making very poor money decisions. And I see it day in and day out. And so, and the other half of that too is obviously I want to help veterans as well, because veterans and blue collar workers tend to make the same terrible money decisions. So I've made this channel in hopes of telling people that, hey, it's okay. Like, you don't have to have a work truck. You're just driving a truck because you want to. Like, there's nothing wrong with driving a Toyota Corolla to work, which is what I currently drive. There's nothing wrong with having a used vehicle. Just because you've got 20 or $30,000 in the bank doesn't mean you have to go spend it on a new vehicle. Or if you're going to do it, spend the 20 or $30,000. Don't finance a car for 96 months, because that makes the payments more achievable.
Right.
And so just trying to get that out there. I have a very good friend of mine works at Blue Origin up in Huntsville. He called me today because he's got $20,000 sitting in a Roth IRA and it's not doing much of anything. And he was wanting to take money out of it. I'm like, no, 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 no. Let's talk. And like, we went over everything, and he just didn't have it in any investments. It was just sitting there. And I'm like, no, you've got to invest this, dude. Like, that's not how this works. And so
Put
him and
that
I
money
talked
to
about it.
work.
And like, I told him, I was like, look, I'm not a financial advisor. Like, take everything that I say with a grain of salt. But if I was you, I would look at, he's in Fidelity. So I was like, look at FXAIX, FZ Rocks. Like, there's some really good 0% fee mutual funds out there that can really utilize your IRA to make it do something. He's like, okay, cool. And so there's just a lot of people in the blue collar industry that don't know these things. And I'm a finance nerd, so I sit here and I, study this stuff. I'm currently in school for finance, and so I'm sitting here, just pouring through this information day in and day out. So just, I want blue collar workers and veterans to use me as a resource. I'm going to do all the homework so that you don't have to, especially with budgeting and whatnot. My wife and I are very big about it. I'm a previous bankruptcy survivor. I have, I've hit rock bottom before, and I know what that feels like, and I don't want anybody else to go through that. And had somebody gotten a hold of me in my 20s and told me what I'm trying to tell people now, I probably wouldn't have had to go through that.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned the Toyota Corolla before. I also drive a Toyota. And, when gas prices shot up, as they did last year, you must have been feeling pretty good, driving, an automobile that gets, 30, 40 miles a gallon.
So the Corolla is relatively new. I was driving a 2002 Lexus before this. It was a great little car, got 25, 26 miles per gallon, but it was paid for. I didn't have anything to worry about. And I think in August, I totaled the Lexus. And so used car prices are ridiculous. So I actually went out and bought a new car, something that I advocate not doing. But because I drive so far, I wanted a hybrid. And if you have priced used hybrids lately, they are astronomically high. And so the price difference between a used car and a new car was almost negligible. So I just went and I bit the bullet and bought a new one. But I'm loving the hybrid. Getting 60 miles a gallon is pretty
Wow.
awesome.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, of driving that you're doing, I have a hard time faulting you for getting a newer car because you need reliable transportation. And when you
Yeah.
start talking about a car that's 3, 5, 10 years old, that can start to become a problem.
Yeah, my backup car is a 1985 Dodge pickup truck, and so I don't need to be relying on that to get me 150, 160 miles a day.
For sure. So, you mentioned you've got kids, 3 kids, I believe.
Yes,
You're
sir.
married. How, that's I have one kid and I know how expensive the one kid is. How do you guys manage your finances, with that much of a, burden, family size wise?
So it's definitely tough. I don't think I've touched on this, but up until May of this year, I was actually a high school robotics and pre-engineering teacher.
Oh, wow.
So I just recently went back into engineering, and the reason I did that is because we had our third child, and I was like, I can't afford this on a teacher's salary. But I was a teacher for 2 years, and we were not living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, it was close, but I was still able to contribute to a 401k, not near as much as I am now, but we were still saving and doing all the right things, just at a much slower pace. The big thing is on that, like where you buy groceries. Like we buy all of our groceries that we can at either Aldi or Sam's Club. So I have a deep freezer. Whenever I go to buy meat, I will go to Sam's Club as early as that thing opens. and I'm going to try and buy every bit of the yellow sticker deals I can get. Well, I know they're going to be expiring in a day or two. I'm going to take them straight home and throw them in the deep freezer. And that saves me. I couldn't even honestly tell you how much money that saves me. I know generally every time I go, I'll spend $200 on groceries at Sam's Club just on meat, and it'll save me $100 just by buying that.
Well, and
Um,
with three kids, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of mouths to feed. So
yeah, and
buying in bulk like that and saving money, I can see how that would be a big
definitely
help.
does. The other thing with that is obviously we really limit how often we go out to eat, which is easy because my kids are picky eaters, so they only want to eat chicken nuggets anyway. So we try and go out. My wife and I do try to go out to eat at least twice a month, and half the time we don't even bring the kids with us. Like we'll just try and make it a date night between the two of us. And then of course before that, when I was a teacher, my main daily driver for the majority of the time was a 1996 Jeep Cherokee. I paid like $1,600 for it. It fit all the needs that I needed. My wife was driving a 2012, GMC Yukon. Like we were never worried about keeping up with the Joneses. And whenever you free yourself from trying to keep up with that mentality, you're going to free your wealth up a lot. So once you realize that nobody cares what type of truck is in your driveway, it's pretty liberating, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. I'm kind of curious. You talk about the blue collar professions and how a lot of these are actually high paying jobs. People not knowing what to do with that kind of money. It's kind of interesting to look at that because I think a lot of people think that blue collar is low income and white collar is high income. And in many cases, it's the exact opposite. A lot of, office workers that, are making probably not much more than minimum wage. But,
Yeah.
across the board with your experience, talking to people and, interacting with people, what do you think is the single biggest mistake that you see people making with their finances usually?
Just in my region, honestly, and I harp on this a lot, but honestly, it's the car that you drive. I see that more often than anything. There's so many, SRT Challengers and Hellcats, Chargers, and like if I walk out to the parking lot right now, we're going to be able to point out, five or six 80 or $90,000 trucks. And it's in my area, I see so many people just squandering so many future opportunities because they're so caught up with what they want to drive. And then behind that is, I have a lot of friends that are house poor. It's like, you've got one kid. Why do you need a 3,000 square foot house?
Mhm.
I grew up in like a 1,400 square foot house with myself, my sister, and my parents. And growing up, like there was still plenty of room. We had everything. So houses are getting bigger year after year.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to keep up with. And it's just, a lot of people just get caught up in the stuff that they own instead of what they're investing in. If you're going to spend money, I would recommend I would encourage you that you spend money on experiences, like take your family on a vacation or something like that. Go make memories. My kids don't care about what I drop them off to school in.
Right.
Honestly, most of the time, my sons always want me to drive the 1985 Dodge pickup truck that I paid $1,100 for. The $27,000 Toyota Corolla, he doesn't care anything about that. So, just keep that in mind. Like nobody cares about your stuff more than you do.
For sure. Well, and you can't put a price tag on the memories that you get from those family trips, from those family
Yes.
experiences. They stay with you forever versus that $80,000 car, that's depreciating in your driveway day
Exactly.
after day, right?
I like to say memories are always going to be appreciating assets. Cars are depreciating assets.
E-
So you always want to stick your money in appreciating assets.
Exactly. I like that. So, personally, what are some of the things that you invest in, or what are some of the investments that you like to play with?
So as I told you before we started this, I am one of the most boring investors that you're ever going to have on here. All right. I am strictly a mutual fund and an ETF guy. All right. I am working on my first real estate property. So I am working on a rental. So that'll be up and going probably in about a year or so. I don't
Oh,
know where my
congratulations
rental
on
journey is
that.
going to take me. But we're in the process of moving right now. We're going to be renting out the current home that we own.
Oh, wow.
My main investments are. mostly the index funds. I'm a huge fan of the S&P 500. Then I've got a small cap value ETF, AVUV. I really like it. Then there is a small cap blend fund that it was mostly in my 401k that I really like.
Mhm.
And then international index funds. So usually I split it up, 50, 30, 20 in my portfolios. 50% of my portfolio is going to be the S&P 500, whether that's FX AIX or the Spartan 500 fund in my 401k. 30% of that's going to be small cap value or small cap blend. And then 20% of that's going to be international index funds.
That's great. I get the opportunity to talk with a lot of investors, a lot of successful investors, and I don't think any of them would disagree with you, talking about boring investments. If the fees are low and it's provided,
Yes.
they're solid, funds, solid, investments, absolutely nothing wrong with that
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
all. Now, just talking through that, you're obviously very knowledgeable about the things that you're investing in. Where do you go for your information when you're thinking about making an investment? What are some of the sources that you typically rely on?
So I am very reliant on podcasts. I spend almost 3 hours a day in the car. So I use that 3 hours proactively, and I am just tearing through as many finance and investment podcasts as I can.
Mhm.
How to Money with Matt and Joel. I'm going to be starting on your podcast here soon. The financial podcast with I cannot remember it, Andrew uh, Giancola. I can't remember his last name exactly. Strive to Five with Joseph Hadaway, Tom, the Money Savings Captain. I've started listening to him recently. There's just a wealth of information out there on Spotify, Apple Music. You just go through and start listening to stuff. Like you're going to be able to find a ton of that, and then I'll take whatever I hear from them, and then go back home. And before I go to sleep, I'm going to be reading up on stuff. And then of course I do read finance books. The Common Sense Investor is one I'm going through right now. So any type of literature or podcast that I can get a hold of, I'm going to be listening to it. Even the guy I carpool a lot. Um, and so one of the gentlemen that I carpool with, he is a huge Dave Ramsey fan. And so we will listen to podcasts and I will try and turn him on to other podcasts, but I'll indulge him and listen to Dave Ramsey podcast with him as well.
Yeah.
And then we compare notes on that as we're driving. And that's a wealth of information in itself because I get to ride to work every day with an electrician that's worth well over, $1 million because he has been just boring investing for 25 years with our company. And so I get to ride to work every day firsthand with a blue collar millionaire. And it really helps keep things into perspective for me.
Nice. Well, and out of all the information that you just listed, podcasts and reading online, I didn't hear you say it's anything that you have to pay for. This is all free education that you're able to go out and get, right?
It certainly is. Now, I will also say my company does pay for me to have a financial advisor. So I do have a financial advisor. He has advised me on very little. I went to the table with the financial advisor. I told him what my plan was, and our meeting basically went like, "Yeah, you've done your homework. Do that." And that was pretty much all he gave me. He was like, whenever your wealth gets to a certain level, we can start looking at, certain other strategies like tax loss harvesting. And as you get closer to your 401k, we can do some other things. He's like, but dude, you know exactly what you need to be doing. Just do what you're supposed to do. And I was like, okay, cool. That's all I needed to
That's
hear.
great. Well, it sounds like that you've gotten a lot from, these sources and the podcasts and so forth. The fact that that is all out there free for anybody to get, definitely recommend for any of the people watching this that if you want to learn finance, that's a great opportunity for doing so, right?
Absolutely. And of course, I didn't say this, but I would be, you know, I'd be doing a disservice, but X is a valuable community to have. There is a wealth of information out there on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And I've met some guys and girls that are just really, really smart that I've gotten a lot of information out of, through X. I mean, you and I met through X. It's a valuable resource if you can weed through the bull crap that you're going to get on there as well.
For sure. So, you mentioned that you're going to be, setting up a rental property. Looking beyond that, what are some of the bigger objectives that you guys are working towards?
So my one of our biggest investment is my wife graduates from school in December. So she actually just accepted her first job last week. So my wife in January will start working, which will be our, I think, third or fourth income stream. It'll be our third income stream.
Very
All right.
nice.
And so, that has been a monumental investment. I don't have a degree. Not saying that I don't advocate for people not to go to school, but I do advocate for people to go to school for a valuable degree. Don't go and get a fine arts degree and expect to be making all this money when there's not really that much of a market for it.
Mhm.
So getting my wife through college has been an extremely valuable investment that we're going to be able to, and it's going to pay dividends as well. Other than that, we're kind of at a point where we're coasting right now. I'm still relatively new with the company. I've got a couple more pay grades that I can bump up, so I'm really focused on my job right now. And then, luckily for me, I am a veteran, so I'm utilizing my GI Bill. So I actually get paid to go back to school. So I'm in school part time. So I'm making money off of that as well.
Oh, very nice. Well, that's terrific. So, one thing that I wanted to touch on, you'd shared with me offline that you're a veteran, you're a bomb technician in the Army, I think is what you said. Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about what you did in the Army.
So I was an explosive ordnance disposal technician. I was the guy in the big green suit that was a bomb technician. That
Wow.
is exactly what I did. I served from 2010 to 2018. I served in Afghanistan in 2013, so I have been on a combat deployment. Um, it was it was a job that is definitely unlike anything else you will ever do.
I can
It
imagine.
definitely I get a lot of crap at work sometimes because the world can be burning down around me, and I'm just like, oh, okay, let's do this. They're like, how are you so calm? I'm like, well, I've done the most stressful job in the world, in my opinion, and this doesn't come anywhere close to it. So it's definitely it's helped me going forward in my other careers because it put things into perspective to me in my 20s at an age that a lot of people don't get that perspective. Like things could always be a lot worse, and I have seen a lot worse. And so it's made my life relatively stress free because I got all of my stress out of the way in my early 20s.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for your service and,
I appreciate that. Thank
very,
you.
very, very, very interesting to hear that kind of work. I can
Yeah,
imagine it sounds like it really helped you with how to handle stressful situations.
it did. And the school to go through EOD school is academically, it's the second hardest school in the military. And so the attrition rate was just very, very high. And so I got used to just basically engorging myself on large amounts of information and retaining as much of it as possible. And that's how I study now to this day. And it's just really helped me. I'm used to just, you know, I don't have a formal education, but I'm an engineer. And the reason is I tell everybody, I'm not formally educated, but I'm probably better at Googling than anybody else in the room. And so there'll be a lot of times we're dealing with an issue on the floor and I'll have my phone out. My boss will, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm Googling how to fix this. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I've got forums or whatever pulled up on my phone. I'm like, hey, we need to input this drive number. It's this fault. Here's the problem. He's like, how did you find that? Really good at Googling.
For people that are coming out of the military, any advice that you would give them in terms of how to make that transition into civilian life and how to set themselves up best financially?
So there is a process whenever you're leaving the Army called A capping. I don't know if it's still called A capping or not, but they try and set you up with like resume building classes and a bunch of other things like trying to get you acclimated. The big thing is you're coming out of the military, like you're used to showing up super early to everything else. You're super early. You're used to, having to be dressed a certain way. You know what discipline is. So a lot of employers are really looking for that because, that's what you're looking for in an employee. So, somebody that's going to be able to do what they're told to do and show up when they're supposed to be there. That's, half the battle. We have an issue with that, everywhere I've worked where it's just people are always showing up late. And so I'm just like, if you can get somebody to show up on time, that's half of what you're looking for.
Mhm.
With the military, I highly recommend if you got the GI Bill or your Montgomery GI Bill, the Post 9/11 GI Bill, use that to go back to school because it is a very valuable tool. Not only are you getting to go to school for free, they're paying you to go to school. So I would highly recommend people do that. If you've got any type of disability rating, they're going to be able to help you with that by a lot. They'll send you to technical courses for free. A lot of times, if your disability rating is high enough, you can get your wife sent to school for free. Your kids can get sent to school for free. The military gives you absolutely every tool possible for you to succeed. It just takes a little bit of research on the VA's website, and you can find pretty much anything you need.
Wow. Well, terrific advice. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Charter, I've been following you online for quite some time. You give lots of great advice, on a regular basis. The links to your account are in the comments below. I encourage everybody
Awesome.
watching this, to
Thank
follow
you.
you as well. And, Charter, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I very much enjoyed this discussion.
All right. I appreciate it, bud. Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right. You have a good evening.
You too, bud.